Okay, so now that you've finished your Unit 10 test, you're ready to start your Unit 11 notes on box and whisker plots. Before we get started, let's make sure that you have everything that you need. Excuse me. You need to have your pencil, you need to have your highlighter, you need to have your calculator already cleared, and you want to keep your homework assignment nearby. This homework assignment, we're going to go ahead and start that at the end of this video. So have that all ready to go. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So you have done box and whisker plots in the back. So the first, you've done box and whisker plots before. So before, you just learned kind of basic information and how to create them. Today we're going to learn a lot more about box and whisker plots and how to use our graphing calculator to create them and to gather information about them. So it's going to be a very good day. All right, let's just review a little bit about box and whisker plots before we begin. All right, so what we know about box and whisker plots. We know that it's all about quartiles and medians. Medians of the whole set of data, medians of the lower half, medians of the upper half. So let's see what we've got here. Just a quick reminder. We know that a median separates a set of data into two equal parts. And then that data can be further separated into quartiles. So when you hear quartiles, you think of what number? You think of 4. Good. All right, so just a quick reminder, and I know this isn't going to make too much sense right now, but let's write it down in our notes so when you come back, you'll understand it a little better. So when you create a box and whisker plot, the first quartile is actually the median of the lower part of the data. Okay? And that is symbolized on our calculator by Q1 with a subscript of 1. Okay? The second quartile is another name for the median of the entire set of data. And as before, and on our calculator, it'll be symbolized with just an M. And then the third quartile is the median of the upper part of the data, and that is symbolized with a Q and the subscript of 3. Okay. Just a reminder, quartiles will separate the original set of data into 4 equal parts. Each of these parts contains 1/4 of the data. That's going to be important later when we're trying to figure out percentages, because if we know the data has been separated into 4 equal parts, we can easily figure that out. Let's take a look at one that's kind of been done for us, and then we're going to write on it, give ourselves some information, and just kind of bring back our knowledge on box and whisker plots. Okay, so here's a box and whisker plot that was constructed about some math test scores. Here's the raw data. The very first thing you have to do, because we're dealing with medians, is to put the data in numerical order. So just as a reminder, data is in numerical order. And so here it is, in order from least to greatest. In this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces of data. So that's an even number. So the median of all the data technically falls between the 2 middle numbers. You would normally average these 2 middle numbers, and the median goes between it. Because they're the same, it's still 80. So that would be our M for median. Let's highlight that, because that's how it'll show up on our calculator. Then we have 5 pieces of data below and 5 pieces of data above. So what we used to call the lower quartile was the median of the lower half of the data. So we used to call it LQ. Your calculator, however, will call it Q1. So we're going to highlight that. Okay? And since we have 5 pieces above it, we have the median of the upper part of the data, which is what we used to call upper quartile, but our calculators are going to use Q3. Okay, so this is what we're going to see on our calculator, so we'll highlight that. Now, the lowest value we used to call the lower extreme, okay? LE is what we used to abbreviate it with. But your calculator is going to call that min x, the minimum x value. Okay, so we'll highlight that. And then the highest value, okay, we used to call the upper extreme, but your calculator is going to call it max x, because it's the maximum value of your data. All right, now that we've got that all organized, how do we create a box and whisker plot? Well, if you remember, we would take our data and then we would come up with a number line that would fit all the data. In this case, since we're going from 65 to 100, it makes sense to go by fives from 65 to 100. And we would find the median first. In this case, the median is 80. It falls right in the middle. And we would put a circle with a vertical line through it right there. Okay? And then we would find the lower quartile, or Q1, and we would do the same thing. We would put a dot with a line through it. And the third quartile, or the upper quartile, would be 90. Okay? We put a vertical line through that. And then what we would do is we would connect those together to form the box. The lower extreme and the upper extreme form the whiskers. And what does this do? This tells us the middle of our data falls between 70 and 90. So while the whole class ranged from 65 to 100 on a test, the middle of the class, middle half of the class, went between 70 and 90, which is not too bad. Okay? But here's what I want you to think about. We were talking about how it's separated into quartiles, 4 equal parts. So that means that this first part here, from the whisker to quartile 1, is 25% of the data. And from quartile 1 to the median, that's another 25% of the data. From the median to the quartile 3, that is another 25% of the data. And from quartile 3 to the max is another 25% of the data. Okay? This represents the middle 50% of our values. So I'm going to put middle 50% of data. Now, during our homework today, they're going to be asking about the interquartile range, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that middle 50%. So I'm going to write this down, interquartile range, because it's between the quartiles. Okay, and the way that we calculate that is we normally would take the upper quartile and subtract the lower quartile. But for our purposes, we're going to be taking Q3 and subtracting Q1. So whenever you're asked to find an interquartile range, this is the calculation you're going to do to come up with that value. That's telling you where the middle 50% lies. So I would say the interquartile range here is 20, because the middle only spreads over 20 different value points. Okay, so that's the review part. Now let's go to our calculator part. So go to the next page and grab your calculator. All right, we're going to keep that handy. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see everything at once. All right, here we go. All right, so we're going to first start by setting up our plot. So when we turn on our calculator, it is cleared. Okay, and that's still, I can see there's a little bit of a glare there, so let me try to move that maybe to this side so you can see it a little bit better. And I'll zoom back out again a little bit more. Come on. Oh, that was maybe way too much. Let's try that again, shall we? That was a little too much. Alright, so here we are. I want to be able to see all of this at once. Okay, so here we go. Let's start by setting up our plot. In order to do that, we're going to need our stat plot. Do you see where it says stat plot? It's above the y equals. So we'll hit second for stat plot, and it's going to give us this screen. Just to remind ourselves, we want stat plot. Okay, and we would like to turn on the plotting, so we're going to hit enter to turn that on. And you'll see right now that it's highlighted on off, and we need it to be highlighted on. So you need to make sure you're on, and then you hit enter so it's blinking on. That's what we're looking for. Okay? And then it's going to give us this new screen. It's asking what type of graph do we want. So we'll arrow down, and we have some choices. Here we have a scatter plot, here we have a line graph, here we have a histogram. Now here is a box and whisker plot, but see the little dots? Those ones have outliers. We don't have any outliers, so we're just going to go to this one right here, traditional box and whisker plot, and we're going to hit enter. And once we hit enter, and I'm going to just highlight it right there, that's the one we chose. Okay. Once we hit enter, all of a sudden it says we only have XList L1. What does that mean? That just means that we're going to be entering in one list of data. So let's just document that. We'll enter only one list of data. We'll do more with two lists later. Okay. So now that we've got that set up, it's time for us to start entering our data. So I'm going to push this up a little higher so that you can see all the data here. So enter the data below by pressing stat enter. Do you see your stat button right here? And I'm going to highlight that just so that it stands out to us, okay? Now it's time to enter our data. So we go to stat, and we're going to hit enter. And you'll notice a whole bunch of lists have shown up. List 1, list 2, list 3. We're only going to use list 1. Okay? And right now it's ready for our first piece of data. So it says list 1, first piece of data. We need to enter it in. So what we're going to do is we're going to enter in all the data here for animal speeds, and then this graph is continued over here. So we're entering in all this information. So while I do that, I'll show you how to do it, and then we'll pause for you to enter in yours. We'll start by just putting in 45, and notice it pops up down here. Now we say enter, and now it's in our list. Now it's ready for 2, so we put in 70. Okay, and then 3, 43. Please make sure you're looking at your screen that the right information is being entered in. Just like texting, sometimes you make errors, and you want to make sure it's done properly so that your statistics come out correctly. All right, I'm going to pause here for a moment while I enter in my data, and you do the same. Pause the video, and then when you're all done, come on back, and we'll see where we are. Okay, so we're back. We should have all of our data entered in, and it should say L1 waiting for the 21st piece of data, but we don't have a 21st. We only have 20 pieces of data. So once you've got that all in, we're ready to move on. The first thing we did was enter our data into list 1. Now, before pressing graph, you may want to change the window view to best view your data, but how are we going to know how to change the window? Well, we don't have to worry about it. If we just press zoom 9, okay, it will automatically zoom to where our data is. So do you see where zoom is right here? We hit zoom and we get a zoom menu. If we arrow down, you'll see that the 9th option is zoom to your statistics. You can just hit zoom 9 or you can arrow down to it. Either one will be fine. There's our box and whisker plot all plotted. But we need to know the information. We need to know what that median is, and nothing's marked. So we're going to have to do a little bit, well, we have to do a little something more. We can go about it 2 different ways. The first thing we can do is use the trace key, and that will help us to find the 5-number summary of our data. So if I go to the trace key right now, look what pops up. Okay, it's saying for list 1, it starts at the median. It's blinking on the median, and it tells you your median is 41. If I arrow over, it goes right to Q1, which is our lower quartile, which is at 35.5. And if I arrow over again, it tells me that my minimum value is 32. And then I can keep going back to get the Q3 or upper quartile at 49 and the max or the upper extreme at 70. So that's great, but maybe I don't want to arrow all over. Maybe I just want a list. So the best way to do that is to use our one variable statistics. So let me show you how that's done. We'll come to the bottom here. So in order to get to our one variable statistics menu, and I'll just highlight it here so you know which one you're doing. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the Stat button again, because we have all of our data already entered in. We're going to arrow over so we're at the Calc menu. And once you're at the Calc menu, then you see there's the one variable statistics. We want statistics based on our one variable that we put in. We'll hit Enter. And now it's saying, where do you want me to pull these statistics from? Well, we want to pull from list 1. So what we need to do is we need to enter in list 1, and maybe you haven't seen this, but if you look on your calculator, and I'm just going to move mine up, to where you see the number 1. Do you see right above the number 1 where it says L1 in blue? Well, that's your list 1. So all you have to do is hit second and 1, and all of a sudden it says list 1 up here. Okay, so this is kind of a shortcut for the buttons to let you know how we did that. If it was in a different list, we could select a different list, because look, there's list 1, list 2, list 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, right? Okay. Let's go ahead and go here. We'll hit Enter. And it's giving us all kinds of data that maybe you can't read just yet, but not to worry. If you just scroll down, you'll get all the data from your box and whisker plot. The minimum value, Q1 value, the median, Q3, and the max. There's all of our information just listed out for us rather than having to arrow along the graph itself. Now there's a note here, so I'm going to put a big box around it in pencil so you can see that. The one variable statistics screen also shows the mean of the data. Okay, but it doesn't say mean. It uses the symbol X bar, that's how we read it, X bar, which is equivalent to the Greek letter mu. That's pronounced mu. So if you needed the mean of your data, you could just arrow back up, and you'll see that the first piece of data at the top is your X bar, and we're going to call it mu for mean, is 43.45. This is our mean. I'm just putting it like that so when you look back you know what mu stands for. Okay, now that you have that, let's go ahead and take a look at the homework. Alrighty, so I'm going to move this out of the way, come back to the homework. Let's take a look. Alright, just a quick review at the top. Box and whisker plots are divided into how many sections? 4 sections. Quartiles, right? Each section represents what percent? 25%. Or, as a fraction, 1/4 of the data. Alright, so let's look at the sample problem here. It says the number of points a basketball team scored over the course of 12 games is below. And that's important. We need to know how many games. Okay? So here's our graph and here's our data, and they want us to answer questions. Well, let's mark up the graph first. If it's over 12 games, and we know that each part represents 1/4 of the data, that means this represents 3 games, this represents 3 games, this represents 3 games, and this represents 3 games. So when we go to answer the question, and I'm just going to put an A in front of here. We'll do A, B, C here. We should have done that beforehand. How many games did they score at least 12 points? So you look where 12 is. Here it is right here. That's where 12 is. So at least 12 points. 9 games. So keep that in mind as you're answering these questions. Now look at the next set of questions. I'm going to just move ahead. You can go back and answer B and C on your own. All right, this one's a little bit different because this time we're talking about 13 games. So that makes our spread a little bit different. That means we have exactly one value that falls on the median. So I'm going to put that one value right there on the median. And then I still have 3 games here, and 3 games here, and 3 games here, and 3 games there. So, and I guess I should have labeled this A, B, and C, so let's do that. So, in how many games did they score at least 12 points? It's the same question on this graph, but it's a little bit different because now we have the 3 plus 1 plus 3 plus 3. So in this case, it would be 10 games. All right, so that should get you started to get an idea of what you're doing. The following questions in this packet, and there are a lot of them because they're multiple choice, they do come from released SOL questions, so it's important that you practice with these. You need to read the question carefully, and for each answer choice, you're going to have to do some work. And you're going to have to show that work. It's not just guessing. You can't just guess on these problems. You really need to do the work to figure out what it's talking about on each answer choice before you can choose the one you think is the best result. In some cases, like over here, it says select all answers that are true. So you're definitely going to have to go through all the answer choices and select all the ones that'll work. So that's your homework for tonight, and there's a back too. So make sure you're answering all of these questions and showing work with each one in order to earn full credit. All right, good luck. I'll see you in class tomorrow. Bye.